Hey everybody, it is Alex back with Optimum Joy, and we have the other Alex, Alex Parlette, who's a therapist on staff, here to talk with us about anger and emotions and all that different stuff. And Alex sees on our staff, he's somebody who sees anger in really anger management across different populations and within just like that broad range of anger in different people. Really, I think, Alex, you have a special bent towards men's work, men of all ages who
Mhm.
experience really like when you build up emotions that are probably more related to a person's anxiety or depression, that those, when you kind of suppress them, they really build up and maybe surface as episodes, tantrums, acting out, aka anger. So, why is it even important that we're talking about anger today?
Yeah. So this has been something close to my heart for a long time as a therapist. Ever since I started my master's program, really, I wanted to do a lot of research in this area, especially with how anxiety and depression lead to aggression,
Mm,
particularly in young adult males.
mhm.
But then how that can continue to last throughout adulthood as well, right? If we don't necessarily learn that it is okay to experience emotions, and it's okay to process them and figure out what we're feeling before it just gets to that outburst, that tantrum for a kid or whatever it
Yeah.
might look like.
Yeah.
So it's something that I researched a lot during my master's program, and coming into the field, it's something that I've worked with a lot of emerging adult men on, and teenagers now as well,
Yeah.
and it's really great work. Yeah.
And so important, I think, especially particularly, we've talked about this on several of these videos with different people and stuff, but our culture, um, it conditions men in a different way than it conditions women. And women have their own cultural problems to sort through. But even like at a very young age, there's all kinds of studies out there that show, I can't think of the ages exactly, but let's say up to 6 years old, um, both male and female in their gender express emotions and receive comfort in a similar way. But let's say if it is six, around six, parents and adults start actually responding to kids' emotions differently. So,
Hmm.
like, um, almost kind of more like within men, what are you going to do about it? Oh, you're sad. What are you going to do about it? Whereas with women, they respond more like, oh, I see that you're sad.
Hmm.
Oh, what made you sad? And they sit with the emotion. So even like as young as those ages, we're already starting to instill in men, push down your emotions,
Yep.
but anger is very powerful and kind of unavoidable. So
Yeah. Yeah. And some of those, other comments, it sounds like, boys don't cry, right?
boys don't cry.
So don't cry. Boys don't
Yep.
cry. As young as 4 or 5 years old, I've heard that
Hmm.
statement thrown out there as well. So um, you don't realize probably that you're doing that as an adult, right?
Yeah.
But it starts with those type of statements, and then it leads to other places.
Yeah.
And emotional regulation isn't easy. It's not
No.
easy. I have a 2 year old right now. It's not easy to learn, right? But it's so important, and into how we interact as humans, right? It's not something that we can just push down or push
Yep.
away.
Exactly. So how prevalent do you see this in boys and men that you work with in your counseling career or just generally as well?
So often.
Mm.
So often. And so, a big tool that I'll use is the feelings wheel. I use it
Mhm.
with a lot of my clients, but particularly men. And it's really funny seeing the reaction sometimes when you first give them the wheel, because it can be overwhelming, right? Because there's a lot of emotions on there,
Right.
and those statements of never even realized there are this many emotions, right? And just different things like that. But it's such a high percentage of
Mm.
the emerging adult men, particularly teenagers, that I work with, that they have a hard time really being able to pinpoint the exact emotion they're feeling. And so instead of doing that process, it just
Mhm.
goes straight to anger and
Yeah.
experiencing anger, and it's manifesting there. But
Yeah.
when we slow it down and pause, right? Yes,
Mhm.
there's some frustration there, but if we can spend some time on that feelings wheel, what else were you experiencing in that moment, right?
Yeah.
Was there some, starting in the middle, working your way out on those feelings wheel? It's fearful, right? Was there something fearful there that led to anxiety, that led to,
Mhm.
whatever it
Yeah.
might be? Was there something sad that you experienced, right? That maybe
Right.
you were hurt, maybe you felt isolated, lonely, right?
Yep.
All of these other things that are very real emotions, right? That we need to sit in and process, and
Mhm.
that it's okay to sit in and
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
Uh, and you know, in younger kids, right? In adolescent boys,
Mhm.
when you see those tantrums, I think as we mentioned earlier, a lot of times that can be seen as like a sign or a clue, right? Of like, okay, something's going on here, right? It's
Mhm.
not just anger. Let's see, maybe there's something going on underneath that anger, right?
Yeah.
But
Yep.
it's so easy for parents to see that anger and get wrapped up in it as well, right?
Mhm.
And not necessarily go and think about addressing what other feelings and emotions might be there.
And, it's reminding me of a different interview we actually did on here with Dr. Alana Roth, who basically said acting out behavior in kids is communication. They're trying to communicate with you that you need something. And I think that that is still true for adults. That if
Mhm.
we're angry, if we have outbursts, it means whether we need to take care of it in our own selves or in a relationship, or, it's like, oh, there's a need, like and not just like food, water, shelter need. There's like emotional connection is a need,
Mhm.
or purpose and meaning is a need, or um feeling like loneliness, and the opposite of that of feeling cared for. Like all of those are needs
Mhm.
that emotions always lead to needs,
Yes.
and it's a lot easier, men aside, I think sometimes it's a lot easier to be angry and push something or someone away than
Mhm.
to kind of let somebody into what is kind of a tender thing
Vulnerable
that would
moment.
allow to be hurt. Yeah, like, man, if I'm kind of like, I need something from you and you decide not to do it, that's tough. So it's risky. It's risky to kind of deal with anger and the other thing.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it is twofold, right?
Mhm. Absolutely. Sometimes I think a lot of the work that you probably do with men in this culture is around emotional literacy.
Mhm.
How do I just kind of instill some psychoeducation and some like emotional literacy? Oh yeah, there are all these feelings on the feelings wheel. It's psychoeducation, it's just helping
Right.
people be familiar
Yeah. Yeah.
with emotions.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
being comfortable with them, right?
Mhm.
Like we said,
Mhm.
it's okay to feel hurt, right?
Mhm.
It's not a bad thing. It's if you're feeling that way, it needs to be addressed, right? Um, don't just show that anger, right?
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, absolutely. Emotions are very real and important.
Yeah. I guess maybe the last thing I'll say on this, Alex, is really, I think this is something, I did not grow up in the most emotionally literate family.
Mm,
And I would not say I grew up culturally as a man. I think that that's totally a different thing. But
right.
I didn't have a lot of understanding within my own language and my own body
Mhm,
to be able to say, oh, sad, mad, glad, scared, like four primary emotions.
mhm,
And for me, and I think that this is actually true for a lot of men in their work, it's like I don't have a word for sadness because our culture has taught me to be so out of touch with it, but I have a heavy feeling in my shoulders.
mhm.
Or for anxiety, I have a tightness in my stomach. And just to acknowledge a body sensation, even though it's not the word fear, or even though it's not the word sadness, is part of the process of just processing your feelings and acknowledging it.
Absolutely.
That's like just as good of work to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Body keeps the
Yeah.
score, right? Great book.
Yeah. It is a good book, isn't it? So,
Yeah.
well, anything else that you would kind of have to say around men, anger, the fact that anger is probably anxiety and depression, some of those things?
Yeah. You know, reach out for help,
Mhm.
right? Like it's even anger. It's okay to feel angry, right? Anger is a very real emotion. Um, if you're angry, there's a reason for it, and it's usually
Mhm.
tied to other emotions, right?
Mhm.
But no one wants to be labeled as just the angry person or
Mm-mm.
the angry guy, right?
Mm-mm.
And and unfortunately, it's a label that a lot of boys get, and a lot of men, right?
Mhm.
And it's okay. It's okay to reach out for help, to come and see someone, to learn those emotions, right? To
Yep.
know what you're experiencing in the body and on that emotional level as well. And it can be just so life changing,
Mhm.
right? Really
Yeah.
learning and getting to know yourself better in the process.
Mhm. Yeah. And, you know, I feel like there's a lot of different ways reaching out. Therapy is like one of the main ways that people I think do kind of learn some of that emotional literacy. But it also is like talking with a friend. I would even say, like, if this conversation resonates at all, Googling primary versus secondary emotions, you
Yeah.
know, and reading about it is in a way like reaching out for help and educating yourself and starting to do the processing of how do I take care of my anger, which is really how do I take care of my sadness, fear,
Mhm.
anxiety, rejection, disappointment, you know, all that
Yeah.
different stuff. So,
Yeah.
well, Alex, thanks so much for carving out a few minutes of your day to pop on here and talk about this. I think it's helpful just to, and just in different ways to kind of scrape a little bit more aside and look at a different area. So I really appreciate it. And until next time, have a good
Yeah.
one.
Absolutely. Bye.